here and we've started a conversation with Scott Geller. And for those of you who don't know Scott yet, he's the senior partner at Safety Performance Solutions. And Scott, you're going to be speaking at the 1% Safer Live and Direct Conference happening April the 24th to the 28th, right?
Yes, and I'm a professor of psychology at Virginia Tech. I've been here 53 years.
Okay, and so is the Safety Performance Solution, that's your company as well, though, right? You do both?
Yes, that's a company that takes the principles that we research and takes them out to the real world. Dissemination.
Okay. And I think that is part of your passion area. And I kind of wanted to dive in and kind of share with our audience, what makes Scott passionate? Like, what are you doing in your expertise area that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, why am I still at the university? Why am I still teaching students? I teach introductory psychology, 500 students in a class. Why don't all my colleagues have left. Why am I still here? And I'll tell you why. I want to make a difference. I want to apply psychological science to make the world a better place. And I am quite frustrated with the pop psychology that's out there, with people who don't know better and on social media and so forth. So the challenge is, here's the word, dissemination. How do we get the science out to the real world? And of course, the 1% Safer book that I have right here in my hand, it has 137 authors have said their perspective on things. So that's where I'm coming from. Is I've been studying how to influence human welfare through psychological science. And the challenge is getting the real world to hear it, to see it. Let me give you a simple acronym. I kind of puts it all together. Think of the letters of coach, COACH. Those simple letters really say a lot with regard to applying psychological science. The first letter is a C, care. Know that I care, and you'll care what I know. The next letter is an O. I will observe you, observe your behavior, and give you feedback. Without feedback, we cannot improve, and of course, leaders are humble enough to ask for feedback, but then observers need to give feedback. There's supportive feedback and there's corrective feedback. And how to give feedback, we could talk at length about that, but just how to give feedback. So, okay, I observe, and then the next letter, A, I'm going to analyze. So with coach, I care, I observe, I analyze. While I'm observing, I'm watching this behavior. By the way, this is the acronym that we use for a term called behavior-based safety. Imagine employees in a workplace observing each other with a checklist of behaviors that are safe and not so safe. They've developed that checklist through their own conversations among themselves. So now with that checklist, I'm coaching another individual. So I'm observing. The next letter is A. I'm analyzing the situation to see, why are we maybe not using protective equipment? Why are we working a little bit faster than we ought to? What is influencing this behavior to be less safe than it should be? And the next letter of coach, big important letter, is C for communicate. Now that I've got this checklist of safe and at-risk behavior, I'm going to communicate. I'm going to talk with you and tell you what I found. And if I do that right, and that's where we do supportive and corrective feedback. If I do that right, the last letter of coach, the H is help. I will help you prevent an injury. Will help you. Now, that's for safety, but it could be that coaching scenario of observing and giving feedback can work for many situations.
So just to go over those letters again, we've got for coach, COACH.
Mhm.
So care, observe, analyze, communicate, help. So I
Perfect.
want to drill down for the observe for a moment, Scott. And the reason for that is you did a very good point about highlighting supportive and corrective feedback, which is very different than critical or nitpicking feedback. Maybe
Oh,
we
yeah.
can break that open because our a lot of individuals that I have been exposed to, they think that they're doing supportive or corrective feedback when actually they're creating more harm because
Yes.
that's not the feedback they're actually giving. So let's break that open for our audience.
Well, have you heard the word constructive criticism? Have you heard
Yes.
that word?
Mhm.
Construct, that's an oxymoron. Criticism cannot be constructive. So that word should be obliterated. We're really talking about paying attention to what people do well and give supportive feedback. By the way, that's easy. Supportive feedback is you simply identify what you saw that they did well, and you point that out and you thank them. Boy, this is where gratitude comes in. I'm
Mhm.
thanking you for setting the right example for other people in this situation. The tough one is corrective feedback. How we give corrective feedback. And to do that, I have to introduce the word that in my little article in this 1% Safe book, humanism. Humanism. Corrective feedback has to be non-directive, meaning I don't say that's wrong. If you tell a person they're doing it wrong, you're turning them off. They're not going to pay
Mhm.
attention. So what you say is ask more questions. Hey,
Yeah.
is there a better way to do that? Or how did you learn to do it that way? Might there be a safer way to do that behavior? The point is you ask them, and then as humanists do, you listen to their perspective. What are they telling you? Again, the word empathy is powerful. Put yourself in their position. They don't want to be told what they did wrong. By the way, what does the word feedback mean to the average person? Can I give you some feedback? Oh, they expect something negative. So
Yeah.
feedback has to be turned around and be something positive. And we give corrective feedback. You need to ask more questions because when that person says, you're right, I could have done it this way and I should have done it. When they own up to the behavior that you observe and say it could have been better, when they own up, you've got them. But you can only make that happen if you're non-directive. One point I want to say, we started behavior-based safety in 1979, and that's the way we taught it. But when it got to the consultants and they took it around, they left out that C. They left out the communication piece. What did they do? They recorded risky and safe behavior on a checklist, and then they went to their computers and they entered the data, and now they have percent safe for different work areas, but they didn't do the communication piece. And you know why? Because it's easier said than done. You have to know how to give supportive feedback, and corrective feedback. And so they skip it. They just went on without. And again, I want to say the most important piece is that interpersonal communication with a colleague, with another worker.
And I want to loop back to something that you said because I think there's a very important piece that is often overlooked. People always go to the corrective feedback, right?
Oh yeah.
What can I tell somebody that they need to improve upon? Interesting though is that you get a more powerful buy-in when you pay attention to what people are doing well and talk to them first about what things you noticed that was really amazing. And,
That's
if you're noticing that people aren't having a lot of accidents, say you work in an environment, for example, like I was in a grocery store where one department is having uh, no knife lacerations, whereas other departments are. Go to that department that isn't having the problem and observe what are they doing differently.
yes.
Can you see why they're not having the same number of incidents as other areas? And
Yes.
then praise them for that. praise them to say, oh my God, you know what? I was really wondering what you guys were doing down here that you're getting zero incidents. But now, when I'm observing you, I'm noticing these habits that you have. How can we duplicate this kind of environment in the other places? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's perfect. But you know why the word feedback has negative connotations? Your boss comes and say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Come to my office at the end of the day. Have you ruined their day? Because the word feedback implies negative. Let's face it, we rarely point out positive things about people because that just goes with the flow. Instead, when a mistake is there, that's the one thing we notice and we jump on that. So you're absolutely right, Tamara. We have to focus on first what they did well, support what they do well. In fact, you might have to search and you might have to look carefully at what is this person doing well. It's because the errors stick out. The mistakes are easy to see, but you have to kind of look at the routine and come up with defining what is the safe behavior. By the way, that's why we claim you need a checklist. You sit down with the work team and you come up with what are the safe things we do, that we should do, and what are the at-risk things that we sometimes do. We have a list. And so when I'm observing that person, now I can see, oh yeah, they're doing that, they're doing all these safe things. And then we notice some things that could be, there's always room for improvement. Every time there's room for improvement. But we focus on safe first. Now they're willing to accept a negative side. But again, we don't just say this was wrong. We say, I wonder why I noticed this behavior. Why that way?
Yeah.
Or tell you what, if they might come up with a reason, they might say, yeah, the boss told me to get this job done as fast as I could, or I did my personal protective equipment, my safety glasses were far away and I wanted to get anyway. They'll give you some reasons, and thus we might come up with corrective action plans. We might come up with things that need to be changed to make this situation a safer place. But it is
We also may, but I'm going to also throw this in there, Scott. We may also find that we learned something that we didn't know because we didn't ask the question and listen. Instead, we're very eager to talk and tell. For example, again, in the grocery retail, I remember we were having a problem with the slicers sliding, and people thought that at first, well, it must be wet underneath. But then we found out that when people of certain heights were using the slicer, that's when it was slipping because of the ergonomics of the pulling.
Yes.
So then we looked at solutions that if somebody was shorter than what the average height was for that station, what solutions could we provide those individuals to be working safely? And it wasn't anything anybody was intentionally doing. It was actually the design that was flawed.
And the key to this entire conversation is getting information from the workers, from the people who are there. They know where the at-risk situation is. And sometimes the leaders or the managers are not humble enough, not open enough to accept that. And of course, that brings up the term, we can talk forever on psychological safety. Do you have the kind of environment where people feel included and willing to mention mistakes, mention room for improvement, for example? That's all about culture. And that's a topic for another discussion. But again, how do we develop the kind of situation where people can coach each other openly and frankly in order to be the best they can be, in order to be as safe as they can be?
And we don't have time for it right now, but that goes into the conversation that you and I were having before we started the podcast about emotional intelligence, which we both agree is a critical skill that leadership and management really needs to have in order to create an environment that would be open for people to have those kind of discussions and feel that they can be authentically direct.
And the word that goes along with emotional intelligence is the other E word that we've been talking about, empathy.
That's
Can you
right.
see it from the other person's perspective?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you learn from the other person's perspective?
Well, that's the big gift in life, is learning from other people's experiences.
Yes.
Right.
Think-
Now I know that we're short on our time here because this is a short podcast, everybody. But I wanted to kind of find out, like, you are going to be sharing your knowledge at the 1% Safer live and direct virtual conference that's happening the week of April the 24th and to the 28th. And I was hoping that you might be able to give us a little bit of a teaser about what you'll be talking about during that session.
Well, you know, everybody's talking about DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And from my perspective, this 1% Safer book just epitomizes diversity. There's 137 different leaders in the field of safety, and they all say something. And you can read it. It's one page. And by the way, it's a heavy book, not only in terms of the knowledge, but in terms of the way it's been put together. So it's diversity. And all of us, 137 of us, we feel included also. We're reading this and wow, it's amazing how much commonality people are coming up with, similar concepts, but said in a different way, from a different perspective. Again, people are talking about 1% safer, but from 137 different voices. Again, all experts in the field, but they all have something short to say. I'm very impressed that Andrew was able to get 137 people to say this. But one reason he did, he said, I don't want a document. I just want one page. I just want so many words. And so people were willing to write down their top thinking about the situation. And all of a sudden, now we have a document, very diverse and very informative. And so I'm proud of my contribution was much of what we just talked about, humanistic behaviorism. How can we help the people improve their behavior by being more humanistic?
And is that what you're going to be talking in your session with Andrew?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, of course, what I learned from some of these other presentations. And again, it's quite an experience. This is quite a document right here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, as Andrew says so well, if we just could be 1% safer.
That's right.
And we started out, Tamara, this whole thing is, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about making a difference in human welfare. And this book contributes to making a difference in human welfare if people read it and share it and teach others. Because as you just said, life is all about learning and teaching,
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Scott, for taking your time out today and joining us.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.